Let's talk about writing, the art of writing, and how you all approach it. We're all book lovers here and really keen to see what it's like, get a peek behind the curtain. But you all have different approaches to writing. And Hector, you write a combination of nonfiction and fiction. So I want to start with you and how you decide when you look at a topic or think of a topic, how do you know if it's a fiction topic or a nonfiction topic, and how do you approach both of those?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I think, and this isn't just me sort of pandering to the moment, but I think really the germ of a book usually begins in a bookstore. You know, it's like, I remember before I had any idea of ever writing any books at all, going to the old Midnight Special in Santa Monica, Chatterton's in Los Feliz, bookstores that don't exist anymore. You know, when I was a kid, my father, who's in the back there, would take me to the Pickwick Books on Hollywood Boulevard. And just wandering those places and being in the tradition and the craft, being surrounded by other writers. You know, they're like, after many books, I sort of now think of them as like my brothers and sisters, you know? It's like, because we're all kind of crazy. It's just like joining the fraternity of lunatic people. And because it's a lunatic thing. You spend 5-6 years doing something, you know, and you're alone in a room, and you have this hope that you'll find an audience.
Yeah.
And so to me, it begins with, my most recent project, a series of novels, began with one sentence, and the voice of that sentence. I want to always do something completely different, which is why every time I've written a novel, it's been followed by a nonfiction book and so forth. Mm-hmm. And all my novels are really different, and I'm just trying to embrace, and I have to say too, Los Angeles is so inspiring. There's so many different cultures that have crossed here, so many cultures in my own family. My family is Guatemalan, Mexican, Jewish, Angelino for, many generations, and also since 1963 when my parents arrived. And so, just looking around and thinking, what story is it that I want to tell? What do I want to, what work of art can I create? And just hammering away 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, tops.
That's it?
That's it. I don't really, I'm sort of also working all day.
Right.
Because I'm carrying around, pieces of paper with me all the time. When lines of dialogue come to me, I never stop working. But actually, in front of the terminal, 2-3 hours. I heard somebody explain once that it was because the energy taken to avoid writing a cliche is so much that you really can't sustain that kind of concentration for more than a couple of hours.
Michael, how many hours a day do you write?
In front of a screen, 4 hours a day is a good day for me.
Mm-hmm. And do you, so you're always like a magpie kind of grabbing things from people, and if like, it's kind of like a shrink when you're in a conversation, you feel like they're always analyzing you. Are we all under the microscope all the time if we're with you?
I don't know if it's a microscope, but your stuff starts in a bookstore. Mine usually starts in a conversation. I just listen. Everyone's a good storyteller, so I listen to stories, and some of them connect with me, usually because of the teller. I'm definitely orally inspired. I want to hear someone tell a story. I've never been inspired to write a book by a newspaper story or a Dateline or anything like that. It's usually someone telling me a story, and the levels of their emotional connection to it somehow strike me, and it goes from there.
Nice. Susan, is it a snatch of dialogue? Is it a newspaper article? Is it just something in your head?
I generally come to stories one of two different ways. And for one thing, I feel like my mind is a bit of a lint roller, and that I'm just constantly collecting and examining what I've collected, whether it's a conversation, whether it's something I've read, something I've seen hanging on a billboard, whatever. It's a constant process of looking. But I see my stories being one of two sort of approaches. One is to take something very familiar, like the library, and looking at it and thinking, God, you know, I think it's so familiar, and yet I really don't know anything about it at all. So I kind of categorize this as the shock of the familiar, the thing that seems right in front of your face, but you've actually never looked at it. Mm-hmm. And I love those kind of stories. And then the other version is the what I call the who knew, which is stumbling on something that I had no idea existed, like a taxidermy convention or, you know, orchid poachers. And my reaction, it's always so specific where I just think, oh my God, who knew? Who knew? And it's always that same response. And so that kind of story, which is this really like setting off on an exploration, on doing an outward bound journey into a new world, is this entirely different kind of story. And how you stumble on those is kind of serendipity. It's just a matter of getting lucky and reading a little tiny story in the Miami Herald about a guy arrested with rare orchids, mm-hmm. or coming across a taxidermy supply catalog and going, oh my God, like, this is not real, is it? And then discovering that there are, 20 million hits on Google if you put in taxidermy. And, so that it's just, you can't conjure those ideas. You have to sort of fall upon them. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to develop the habits that lead you to them, which is to always have your ears and eyes open.
Right. So you all do that, relentless observation.
Yeah,
Which,
and I was also going to say, in terms of quantity, which is interesting, I measure my work by word count. And also, as a nonfiction writer, half of the time I'm not writing at all. I'm out in the world doing research, interviewing people. So days and days or months, or in the case of books, years will go by where I haven't written a word, and I've been working on a book for, say, 4 years, and I have not written one word. But that's because I have to do all of that research first. But when I sit down to work, I have a daily quota. I try to hit 1,000 words a day, and I'm really anal and OCD about it. So if I have like 994 words, I feel like I can get 6 more. And then when I get the 6 more, then I feel like I can take the day off. And 1,000 words is a very productive day. And in fact, initially I set my quota at 800, and then I was making it pretty easily, so I moved it up to 1,000. And
wow!
And
what about your steps? Do you have what are your step count? What's that?
Well, and I'm doing 10,000 steps. I'm also learning the oboe while I'm doing this, so I'm a multitasker. But it's just because the hours. That's a funny metric for writing, because you can spend a lot of time, as you both know, where you're working incredibly hard, but there's nothing on the page, or something will come quickly. So it's not a great measure, mm-hmm. for me anyway, to say, all right, I'm going to sit for 4 hours.
Yeah. So you must all have this sensation where you're sitting in front of your, I guess, laptops, right? It's all laptops, desktop, whatever it is, computer. And there's a blank page and there's nothing there.
Oh, yeah.
And then what?
Well,
I have a drink, usually.
Well, I think, we all worked in journalism, correct?
Yeah.
Right? And so, in journalism, you learn how to get the bicycle going pretty quickly.
But you're on
because-
have an
Yeah.
editor, you have
it's
the
like
broadcast.
2:15 and there was some shooting and you got 2 hours and a half to deliver the piece. And it's like, okay, anything basically, And so once you've had that ingrained in you, once you've met a deadline over and over again, it just sort of becomes like second nature. And I tell my students, look, just write anything. Just start writing anything. I fail every day. It's called writing a draft, and just sort of the willingness to be an idiot on the page and to write something that sucks, but to make my word count for the day. To write for me, it's more like 700 or 800 words that usually in a day that I feel like, oh, that was a good day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about journalism since you raised it. RIP in many instances. And you two worked together in the LA Times, and you worked the cop beat, right? And so talk about that and how obviously that inspired your career, Michael. So how did you decide, okay, I'm going to leave this and enter the world of writing, and how did that inform your writing, working at the LA Times?
Well, I wanted to write detective stories before I became a journalist. So that journalism was a means to an end. I knew if I had a press pass, I could get into police stations and courtrooms and all that kind of stuff. So I always had that secret goal. And so you're talking about always being observing. I was always looking at stuff that I knew doesn't belong in a newspaper story, but would be really cool in a book down the line somewhere. So so it wasn't like I was doing newspaper work and then decided to do the books. It was kind of the other way around.
So you saw it as a way into writing these books.
Yeah.
Getting the real stories.
Right. And I think I can take some credit for Hector's career because he was an intern assigned to work the cop beat with me, and I think he quickly saw that he wants to pursue a more literary life than genre writing.
Well, yeah, that was the really crazy thing about journalism was that it was a daily lesson in, as Susan was saying, that life is producing all this crazy shit. It's like everything, every day was like a surprise. You do something that seems really ordinary. I'm going to do a story about a shooting or whatever, crime happened that day, and you're going to see something you'd never seen before. Mm-hmm. And for me, becoming a writer was like, wanting to capture that. I never thought I would write books before I became a reporter. I mean, to me, that was already, lo máximo, as we say. But it was like, wow, yes, stuff that doesn't fit in the paper. It was like so much. Every day there would be so much that I would learn interviewing, somebody on the street and then not being able to tell the full story. It's like, oh, maybe I should be writing books instead.
Mm. It makes you a very quick study of this massive town. When you're a journalist and you're going out on stories, you go to places that normally you'd never go to and most people never go to. So you really, I remember it's a false thing, but I always felt like at the end of working a night cop shift, driving home, I felt like a prince of the city because I kind of had a handle on the city that most people don't have.
But you saw a certain aspect of the city, a dark and kind of scary aspect, right? If you're covering crime and cops.
You see that, but
Not
you
that-
also see some amazing, good people doing the right thing at great sacrifice. And so it wouldn't happen every day, but there was a lot of things that happened that were inspiring. And yes, they were on the edges of crime or the dark side of what society is, but there was always something redemptive and uplifting that I would see on the job.
So, Susan, you were never tempted to write fiction, or were you?
No, I love fiction, and it's what I read almost exclusively in my spare time. And I think I'm intimidated by the thought of it. I've got to also admit that I find the exploration part of my job is so much fun that I can't imagine giving up that part of what I do. And and I also like the writerly struggle with reality. I mean, almost no story ends up quite the way you would have hoped it would have. And in fiction, you could fix it. But in real life, in nonfiction, you have to grapple with the messiness that you encounter, and I find that really interesting and really challenging.
You look like you want to disagree.
Well, first
A
of
little
all,
bit.
the process you're describing of writing nonfiction is also the process of my writing fiction. I mean, it's like I'm writing a novel that's set right now 500 years in the future, and so I'm researching decay. How do things fall down, right? What will fall first to you? The wood ceiling will fall first. I know all this stuff now because I've been researching it for a couple of months, and so it's exactly the same process. And yeah, I think that the thing about nonfiction is that, yeah, you end up discovering the messiness and you have to cope with it as a writer. As a fiction writer, you're looking for the messiness that's inside your idea. And so you're sort of looking for the same thing. And it's the process of the research is just going around and talking to people. I have a love story in my novel, and I've been thinking about the times that I fell in love. I've been watching love story movies. I've been talking about my kids about the time they fell in love. And just, reaching in, it's research, picking out from all different places. So it's really very similar process, I think.
Yeah, and I have taken classes when I was a college student, which were history and poli-sci classes, and we only read fiction. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it can be a greater truth teller than nonfiction.
Well, I think it's I wouldn't say better, I just think it's a different way of truth telling. And, I think it's a false comparison to say fiction is better at telling the truth than nonfiction. And I think the idea that fiction doesn't require research is not what I meant to imply, because I know that people do enormous amounts of research, and that when you're reading a piece of fiction, if it rings false, you're not going to buy it,
Right.
I think the difference is, well, actually, it's very funny because, when I was working on The Orchid Thief, the entire many years I spent working on the book, what I thought would be the ultimate conclusion was that I would finally see a ghost orchid, and that would be the end of the book, and, tie everything up neatly. And as the time was growing shorter and shorter, and every trip I was taking to try to see one fell apart, I suddenly thought, I'm not going to see a ghost orchid. Like, this was supposed to be the culmination of the entire book, and it's not going to happen. And then suddenly I realized that was because that was the point of the book, was not seeing this thing that I was pursuing, that it's not about the satisfaction of the pursuit, it's about the pursuit itself. And I don't know if any of you have seen Adaptation, but they decided to try the alternative ending, which is to find the ghost orchid. And so, which is more true? It doesn't matter. It's not a matter of which is more true. It's that in the nonfiction book, I had to confront the complete failure of my concept, and then suddenly realize that no, it was success because it was reality. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to say something. I mean, The Orchid Thief, I've read that 3 or 4 times because I assign it to my students in literary journalism, but also because it was a transformative experience for me as a reader. Because
Thank you.
when I read that book, I realized, because I had written a novel, I had written a book of sort of nonfiction that was okay, but then I realized, oh my God, I can think like a novelist when I'm working like a journalist.
And I think that that's where a journalism training is both helpful, but you have to bust out of it. And I never worked as a daily journalist, the one time I was given a beat, I was such a failure that I was assigned to cover county government. And I would come back with these insane stories, and my boss would say, "How is this on your beat?" And I'd say, "Well, it took place in the county." And finally, they just said, "Just never mind. Forgive it. Don't do the beat." But I haven't. At the same time, I did learn rigorous reporting. I have to. I don't think you can just dive into abstract painting if you don't know how to draw a lifelike figure. And I sort of think that analogy is fairly accurate. Like, you find the freedom once you learn the rigor and tradition of, the most scrupulous kind of reporting.
Yeah. And I would say your books read like novels to me, too. Like the library book, for example.
Well, I made everything up.
Yeah, good. I knew it. I could tell. Michael, how do you straddle that line? Because your books are very realistic, off the page, hard-boiled, if you will. They could be true, these stories. Maybe they are.
Well, there's probably a grain of truth at the starting point. But yeah, I mean, I was a journalist for 14 years. 12 of them I covered cops and crime and courts. So you kind of take what you have to the dance, and yeah, my books are fiction, but I want them to be as accurate about society and systems as they can be, because as you were saying, if you don't have that right, if it rings false, you're going to lose your reader. And so I think that's really important. The other thing you said was that in fiction, when you get into one of these rough spots, you can fix it because it's fiction, and that's true. And I've often gone back to cops or lawyers or whatever and said, I need this to happen, but I want it to happen accurately. So walk me through it. How can I make that happen? And and that happens all the time in my writing.
And they say, what do they say?
They usually figure out a way for it to work. I mean, I don't say something outlandish, but it's usually something to do with the law and, how do I make this happen, basically is what I say. I want this to happen. How do I do it?
How do I get this guy
It's funny.
Yeah.
This makes me think of the movie Body Heat. And the entire thing turns on a legal fact.
Rule against perpetuity.
Yeah, and
Wow.
and I remember when I saw the movie, I thought that it would never have worked if that were not, in fact, the law. I feel like it as a reader, as a movie viewer, that that I think readers are really smart, and they sense what feels real, even if it's something quite crazy. I think they sense it. They have a really good antenna for what's really real.
And so both of you, and I don't know, Hector, if you have worked in Hollywood or done some screenwriting. You have as well, TV writing, or?
I have my guild card if you want to see it.
Oh, wow. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit, because you're kind of new to it, Susan, right? So talk about your experience working on the John Wilson show and how that kind of writing, we love that show. We love that show. Yeah, it's great. But a lot of it was scripted, which I was surprised to
Right. I mean,
find out.
it's. I will say I had always been fortunate enough to have a lot of things optioned for film, but I never particularly was interested in writing. And then you move to LA, and like your dentist is a screenwriter. It becomes part of the culture.
The question for all of you is like, how do you write differently then when especially if you're adapting your own work, Michael and Susan, but Michael, maybe you can talk about it because you're working on Lincoln Lawyer and Bosch.
It's a weird experience, especially I've had this kind of stuff happen to me kind of late in my career, so I'm very much steeped in writing books. And then when you go to a script, you lose a big chunk of what you do in books, which is interior thought. And so I had a very difficult transition because I did want to write some of the scripts on these shows, but I ended up getting rewritten a lot.
You get rewritten?
Yeah, because I mean, it's like, hey, this is based on my book. Why are you rewriting me? But I just couldn't make that transition. I'm better at it now, but initially, like 10 years ago, first season of the Bosch Show, I think I wrote 3 scripts, and they were all heavily rewritten. And I was having a hard time jumping from the freedom and going inside people's thoughts and so forth in a book to a place where you can never say what someone's thinking. And dialogue becomes so much more important in a script than in a book.
Oh, right.
That's something I've taken away from working in TV is to concentrate more on dialogue in my books. But at that time, that's, they say whatever the eyes are the window to the soul. It's really dialogue is the window to the soul, and I had to learn that lesson.
And without pipe laying, as they call it, right? Just through the dialogue telling the plot points.
Yeah, non-exposition dialogue, I guess you call it. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, I think I wrote the third and the fourth drafts of the adaptation of my own book on the Chilean miners into a movie that eventually would star Antonio Banderas. There ended up being like 6 or 7 drafts, so I had the third and the fourth. And so first of all, my takeaway from the whole process was that the star is everything. It's all about giving the star time on the page. It's about condensation. You have 120 pages. Maximum is a minute a page for us. And so it's all simplification. And it's also just entering into a very strange. You're just part of a whole huge division of labor, and so you're just the inspiration for what's going to happen later, for the actors and the director, and they're all going to just change it. Yes, everybody gets rewritten all the time. But the really weird thing that happened was that the main contribution that I wrote that contributed to the adaptation of my own book was that I introduced a female lead who was based on a real person. 55-year-old great-grandmother, Chilean street vendor, approximately 4'11", really stout woman. Very dark, because she sold empanadas in the Chilean desert, and of course they got Juliette Binoche to play her.
Of course.
She was wonderful.
Perfect. French woman. That's perfect. I love it. Okay, well, let's finish up this part of it by just bringing it full circle, and I just want to have you wax eloquent on libraries and ask you, what is your first and most memorable experience in a library? And you wrote a whole book on it, so that's an easy question for you, so you can start.
It is an easy question for me. I feel in a way that I was raised in libraries. My mother was a passionate library user and believed in libraries, and we lived near a branch library where I grew up, and we would go several times a week. I can't tell you the first time that I went, but going to that library when I was really, really young and being allowed to roam by myself and realizing as I was writing the book that might have been the first place where I ever really was given autonomy as a little kid, because it was this safe place. My mom would go off to the adult section, I would be in the kids section. And also the intoxicating feeling that I could have anything I wanted, as opposed to going to a store and saying, I want this and this and this, and my mom would say, you can pick one. At the library, I could pick as many books as I wanted, and I would leave without paying for them. And so for a kid, it was just magic, like this magical place where they let you take things. It was kind of, I didn't I also loved the books, but the transaction was just magic.
And stamping the card and
Yeah,
it's
I
all of
mean,
it. It's
everything
great.
about it was such a ritual, and it was something, even the librarians pulling the card out and stamping it with the date that the book had to come back. It was a ritual. The sounds, the smells, all were so potent to me that when I first took my kid to the library, I was flooded with these memories of going with my mom. And I really hadn't thought about them in a long time, but just going to the Little Branch Library was here in Studio City. And I thought, this has not changed at all. It's exactly the same, everything about it, with the exception of the stamping the cards, but the feeling and the smell and the sound in the library of this quiet sound of busyness
Yeah,
that
it's very
is unique
comforting.
to a library. And it was almost as if I was being thrown back instantly into the experiences I had as a kid.
Michael?
Yeah, libraries have been very important to me. The summer that I turned 13, my family moved from Philadelphia to South Florida. And Philadelphia is not, pretty hot in the summer, but nothing is like the humidity in South Florida. And my parents worked and school hadn't started, so my mom was a bank teller, and she would take me and my two brothers to this big city park, and we were supposed to, play and spend the day there, and she'd come pick us up at 3, and it was so brutally hot. But one day, one of my brothers looked across one of the fields, and there was a little branch library there, and they had a banner that said, "Now air conditioned." And so we tracked over there and to cool off, and the librarians are pretty smart. They knew what all these kids were doing in the library, so they always made sure you were reading a book. And a librarian gave me To Kill a Mockingbird, told me to read it, and I would bend the corners and hide the book in the wrong place so I could get it the next day. And I read the book over that summer, and I think that story, that experience just kind of stayed with me. And many years later, I write these books called The Lincoln Lawyer, and when I was writing those books, I was thinking, this is Atticus Finch with a ponytail. And so the influence of that has always been with me.
Wow.
My first library story is in utero, because my parents arrived from Guatemala when my mother was a few months pregnant, and they settled in East Hollywood on Madison Avenue, which isn't the same as Madison Avenue in New York. It's in East Hollywood, now called Little Armenia. So as luck would have it, my parents arrived in this tenement building, which is still standing, by the way, and there are still immigrants living there. And it's a block away on Madison Avenue from the Cahuenga branch of the Los Angeles Public Library, the corner of Madison Avenue and Santa Monica Boulevard, yes, in East Hollywood. And so my father and mother, my father had a 6th grade education in Guatemala. He wanted to learn English. And so when my mother was still pregnant with me, he would walk over 2 blocks to the Cahuenga branch and check out the English courses in the library. And it's one of the Carnegie libraries. It's still standing. A beautiful library, and I've gone there a couple of times to pay, to do my pilgrimage to this place where my reading journey began before I was born. And then later I grew up in another part of East Hollywood and went to the old Hollywood branch that's by where the Hollywood police station used to be, which figures in so many of your books. And I just remember getting my first library card, this cardboard little piece of paper. It was typed with my name on it, and it was my first ever ID. And my father taking me there and showing me that I could have any book in the world and introducing me to a life of reading. And then finding out after I had written 4 or 5 books that this man who was telling me that reading was everything, his own mother never learned to read and write. and realizing that we had closed this family circle in part thanks to the library.
Wow,
So,
that's
thanks.
beautiful. You all have such beautiful library stories. Oh, I love it.
There's the experience of growing up in LA and of having grown up in LA in the 60s and 70s when this place was brand new, sort of. The Pomona Freeway I remember going out to the end of the Pomona Freeway into the orange orchards at the end of the Pomona Freeway. And then there's the experience of having been a reporter in Los Angeles, which was, as Michael was saying, just being invited to go to all of these incredible places. And, gradually as I get older, sort of absorbing these great truths about LA. I mean, LA is a meeting point of so many diasporas. The Jewish diaspora, the Armenian diaspora, the Cantonese diaspora, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, I think that in Los Angeles, we're all maybe a generation or two removed from a story of poverty or from a peasant someplace. And so this is a place where people have reinvented themselves. They've let go of these generational traumas or tried to. So to me, when I think of Los Angeles, I think of that sort of great epic, the intimacy of that epic family story of the man who survived Treblinka or Auschwitz, or who left a village in Guatemala and came to this place where, he met Sinatra, or bought a Ford Rambler and drove it, at 75 miles an hour on the Pasadena Freeway. I mean, those are these, incredible, that's what I think of when I think of LA.
Can I just read a passage from your book that I happen to have here that sort of answers that? You, in your latest book, you wrote, when an immigrant woman arrives in an American city like Los Angeles, the empire gives her an identity that settles over her like a cloak, like the costume of an alien tribe, and yet the new territory represents the possibility of personal liberation. It's beautiful.
Well, I realized that quite inadvertently, I've written 2 books about LA. The library book, obviously, but my book, Rin Tin Tin, which came out before that, really was all about Hollywood. And the reason I live in LA is the accident of those books. I had come out to do a bunch of reporting for Rin Tin Tin, whatever year that was, whatever years ago. And before we came out, my husband, who was going to come with me, kept saying, I hate LA, it's so horrible. And I said, it's horrible, it's whatever. I kind of happen to like it, but I need to come out to do reporting, so just come with me. It's been 11 years. So, LA is, everywhere is full of stories. LA has been, for me, uniquely rich with stories. The fact that I've written 2 books that really were based here was truly unplanned. And they're such different books that I never even think of them both being set here, but they are. I happen to think you can find stories anywhere you are, but this is a wonderful place to be a writer. I feel like it's so, as Hector said, it's just filled with people. There's a sense of incredible roiling and energy because everybody is coming with some amount of drama in the reason that they're here. Mm-hmm. Even if it's just, I've really got to get a better tan. There's something that drew people here comes from some kind of passion.
And Michael, yours are just so LA, dripping with LA.
Yeah, no, I'm just repeat what you just said, that it's the gift. LA's the gift that keeps on giving. There's just so many stories, so many interesting places. I know I'll never get to them all in my time as a writer, but I'm always exploring and trying to find new places, to take my stories. I got to thank David over there for when I met him on that night we were shooting in front of the store. I probably went in there to say, how much is this going to cost to have your mural? Because you had a great mural we wanted to get on the show. But, you know, and you talked about the history, the Jewish history of that area. I had a book come out just 3-4 months ago that really dives into that. You know, just a little known fact that Cantor's Deli was actually in Boyle Heights, you know, many, many years, decades ago. So that kind of history and how you can bounce that forward into a contemporary story, that's what I love doing. And, you know, wrapping it around, you know, some kind of crime or mystery or detective story. But it really always starts for me with LA and where I want to go in my stories.
And Michael, you've been a great ambassador for LA to like the world, because I don't know how many languages you're translated in, but all these readers are getting this sense of the richness and fullness of LA. And so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He just told me today that I'm big in the Falkland Islands.
This has been, you know, a great afternoon, evening, talking about books and Los Angeles and libraries and the importance of them and the importance of keeping a community together. So thank you all for coming, and thanks to our panelists.